Hello, everyone. My name's Kate, and I am an academic advisor at Greenfield Community College. And every year, right around this time, I usually give an in-person presentation about how to write scholarship essays. So this year, I'm trying it as a pre-recorded video workshop that you can watch. And then next Wednesday, February 24th at noon, I'll be holding a group drop-in follow-up. So you can check the GCC homepage for that event listing with the link. As I said, it's a group drop-in, so whoever's there is there. You can come in and out. And you can bring your questions, talk through ideas, whatever you want to do to follow up. And we'll also talk in this presentation about where you can get individual assistance. So with that, let's get started talking about writing scholarship essays. So first, let's just go over what we're going to do in this video so you can skip ahead if you'd like to. We're going to talk about what the GCC Foundation is and what the scholarships are, how to access them. We'll briefly touch on other scholarships and how to find them through the GCC website. We'll talk about some challenges of applying and writing essays, and we'll talk about writing the essays, give you some tips, look at some examples, and then we'll talk about resources or help if you run into trouble, or help with your writing. So first of all, right off the bat, I want you to know the deadline. Write it down, put it in your calendar. The deadline for your application is Monday, March 1st at midnight. No exceptions. It says it right on the application. Must be in by midnight or you've lost your chance to apply for this year. So first of all, what is the foundation? You can find out more about it by reading the link there, but I'll just tell you broadly. The GCC Foundation is the organization that supports the college by fundraising and building community relationships that support students. And part of that is offering scholarships directly to students that you can apply for once a year. So the applications are open now. And as I said, deadline, March 1st by midnight, your application has to be in. So you can find out more information about the scholarships on this page. You can go to GCC Foundation Scholarships, and we will look a little more closely at that in a moment. So we're going to talk about who is eligible for scholarships, currently enrolled students, and there are some scholarships that are for specific groups. So nobody would be able to apply for every single one of them. There's certain ones that will be relevant to you. So they might be aimed at particular majors, people transferring to a four-year school, non-traditional ages, residents of certain towns, etc. So I'm going to show you how to apply and let you know that you just need to fill out one application, even though there are many, many scholarships available. So let's look again at this foundation webpage. Oh, I want to keep the captions there for people to see. So this gives you the information that you need about how to access the application and the information that you need about what you need to write about and some additional tips. So you want to read that thoroughly. So as this says, you want to go to your My GCC page, and you're going to see a link right there that says apply now for GCC Foundation scholarships. And again, deadline March 1st at midnight. So all you have to do is click this arrow. So as you'll see, I'm not a student, I'm not enrolled, so I can't apply. If you are seeing this and you think you should be able to apply, all you have to do is email web@gcc.mass.edu or webmaster, same thing, and explain what's happening, and they'll help you figure it out. So as I said, you fill out one application and it will screen you for which scholarships are relevant to you. So on that homepage, and you can get a link to it here, it says if you haven't already, please review important scholarship information and guidelines here. So that's going to send you right back to the page that we were on before. And on this page, you can download the list of scholarships, the descriptions of them, what they are. Don't think of this as something that you have to go through and find yourself, all the ones that are relevant to you, because as I said, the application process will do that screening for you. But this is important to give a glance at, to read this top part thoroughly, and also to go through and see if there are any extra pieces of information that you need to know about scholarships that apply to you. So for example, so there's one personal statement that everybody needs to write, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. But there are also scholarships that require an extra written, some kind of supplemental essay. So you're going to see that with the square symbol. And then some scholarships require letters of recommendation, and those are indicated with this circle symbol. So as you look through, that's what you want to pay attention to, because if there's something that applies to you, or that you are able to apply to, that you're eligible for, you want to make sure that you're getting on top of asking for the recommendations and planning for those second supplemental essays. So like I said, some of these are very specific to particular groups, right? So this is transfer scholarships here, scholarships for West Franklin County residents, scholarships for particular majors, for people of color, students who identify as women, GCC work study students. So you can see as we scroll through, there are a couple of these special requirements. So if you are a work study student, you need to have a recommendation from your work study supervisor. And these supplemental essays, it's good to have a glance at them, because they're different and there might be important things to notice about them. So for example, this requires a resume and a letter, which includes why GCC was selected for study and the rationale for the selection of their career goals or plans. There is one that is for English essays that you write in English 101. So if you've taken English 101, you have written this essay. You don't need to write an extra essay. You've already done it. So that's just an important thing to note. So you can just kind of like scroll through here and look at the information about these. And it also is motivating perhaps to look at the amount of money that you can receive if you win any of these. So there's 5 of these scholarships available at $2,500 each. You know, some of them are smaller, $350, but that's still $350 and you can win more than one. So yeah, we'll talk about that aspect. Okay, so we talked about what the foundation is, who's eligible, how to apply, and what the process is. Here are some key tips for you, and we'll circle back to some of the things that we've looked at so far. So we looked at those scholarships that require recommendation letters. You really want to give people as much notice as possible. So if you're watching this, you know, a week and a half before the applications are due, which is tomorrow, you don't have 2 weeks, right? Ask as soon as possible. In the future, keep in mind that 2-week notice. If you have not asked yet, ask today, ask immediately. Pause this video, write a polite email asking whether the person that you would like to write a letter for you is willing to do so. And make sure you're careful about who the recommendation letter needs to be from. The one that we looked at, it needs to be your work study supervisor. There are other ones where it requires a faculty member. So for example, I, as an academic advisor, am not faculty, I'm a staff member. So if you're not sure, that's something you can ask me. That's something you can ask of the other resources that I'll put out here. But you want to make sure you're asking an appropriate recommender and that you're giving them lots of notice so that they can plan and write you a positive recommendation. Make sure you tell the recommendation writer what you're applying for, especially if it's not somebody who is on campus or who works for GCC rather. Tell them when the deadline is and where to send the letter. So you can find that information about where to send the letter at the very top of this list of scholarships. So it says recommendations can be emailed to acarlin@gcc.mass.edu or mailed to the GCC Foundation, attention scholarship recommendation, and then the college's address. So make sure you're giving that information to your recommender so that they don't need to look it up. And then follow up with the recommender politely before the deadline, maybe a couple days before, just to make sure that they've submitted that. Other key tips, very important. You are going to, when you go into that application and start filling it out, it's going to let you just fill out a field with your essay. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be writing it in the moment. The whole point of this workshop is that you don't want to just, write something off the top of your head. So you want to first go into Microsoft Word, Google Docs, whatever it is you use to write your things, compose your essay in that separate document, have it ready when you're filling out the application, cut and paste it right into there. Make sure you submit your essay early. As I said, there's no exceptions. It says it right at the top here. Application deadline, midnight on March 21st, no exceptions. If something goes wrong, if you run into tech trouble, if you're not sure that you submitted it, you want time to figure that out. So keep in mind that, GCC closes at 5 p.m. on a typical day. You may not be able to get help after that time. So you definitely want to do it before 5 p.m. and hopefully maybe even before the weekend if you're able to. So other scholarships. For this, we're going to head over to the financial aid website. But I'll just go through these bullet points first before we go over there. They have an application tracking tool, which we're going to check out. And I'm showing you this because I want you to start with the GCC website if you're looking for other scholarships to apply for. If you really want to look elsewhere, one idea could be to go to other schools' websites and look at their financial aid offices and look at the scholarship search tools that they offer. But if you're just using, Googling scholarships, a lot of scams can come up, and you want to particularly be careful if something is asking you to pay for the privilege of applying to a scholarship. That is usually a scam. A couple rare occasions where it's not, but you want to be really careful about that. If you have any concerns, particularly if you're being asked for some kind of fee, just call up financial aid, send them an email, ask them, hey, is this a legitimate situation? But one way to kind of avoid worrying about that is to just go through the GCC financial aid website. And then all of these resources here are vetted by our financial aid office. So you'll see here you can get to the foundation scholarships information as well, right through the financial aid office. But we're going to look at other scholarships. And right at the top here is that scholarship application tracker that I mentioned. So it's going to pop open as a view only file, right? You need to be logged into your own Google Drive, and you need to click File and make a copy or download it yourself in order to edit it. But this is a really useful little chart that they've already made you where you can keep track of what you've applied for or what you want to apply for, what materials are required, when the due date is, when it was submitted. All this stuff is laid out for you. And the award date, that's when they announce who wins, right? So that's super useful tool just to help you stay organized. You can see why it's important to stay organized because there's a lot on here. So there's some local scholarships. And we'll talk more about like application pools in a second, but Local scholarships are going to have a better chance for you than national scholarships because there are fewer people who live in Greenfield than who live in the United States. So definitely check out those local scholarships, not as local as just Greenfield, of course, but you'll see some of the different ones. This one is specifically for Athol area. There's some that have, just like the foundation scholarships, particular criteria, but they'll tell you what those are. So those are specific scholarships. There are specific scholarships for transfer students that are often to area schools that you can look through, get information about. And then these scholarship search databases, that's where you can get a huge number of scholarships that it spits back at you, that it would be very useful to keep track of with that tool. So there's a scholarship matcher tool here that's really good. So instead of going through each individual scholarship, you can answer a bunch of questions and then it'll give you a list of things that it's already telling you you're eligible for. So that's useful. So definitely check that out. But right now we're going to go back to the foundation scholarships focus because that is the deadline that's coming up, and that is the one that is a small pool, right? Because it's just GCC students. So you're only competing with GCC students for these awards. And so that's the first thing I want to talk about that stops students from applying. They think that there's no chance that they'll win. There's actually quite a good chance that you'll win. As I said, you're competing only with GCC students. Many of the scholarships are only for people in certain groups, like we talked about before. So if you're a nursing student, you're only competing with other nursing majors for these scholarships. The other thing is you're only competing with other students who apply. A lot of students don't apply to these. And I want to put out there right now, hot tip. We looked at some of those scholarships who have a supplemental essay required. Those ones have an even smaller pool because the number of students who make that effort to write that second essay or to submit that second essay, because as we talked about, there's at least one where you've taken English 101, you've already written it, but taking that extra effort, going that extra step can really, really up your chances because not very many people take the time. So you are only competing with other GCC students, and many of the awards have very small applicant pools. Something else that I hear students say is that scholarships are only for people with high grades or low income, and they think if they don't fit either of those two categories, there are no scholarships available for them. It's true that some specify these criteria, but many don't. As we saw when we looked through the list, there's some for people who live in different areas, different identities, different ages, etc. Another thing that stops students from applying, and I think probably the biggest thing, is people don't want to write. They don't want to write the essays, the basic personal statement, and they don't want to write the supplemental essay. So here's my thinking on that. If you spend 5 hours on this and you win $1,000, you've made $200 an hour. I would do a lot of things that I hate for that rate of pay. So try and think of it that way. If you don't win, you have an essay that you've written that you can revise and submit again next year. And worst case scenario is you've had practice doing a type of writing that you are very likely to have to do at some point in your future. So it's really, it's a win-win. The other thing that turns people off is an idea that the application process is complicated. It's really not. I just showed it to you in a couple of minutes, and I'm also going to show you lots of resources for help if you run into trouble. So it's really not that hard. The process of actually writing the essay, kind of related to the hating writing bit, but I'm going to give you some tools to break it down into smaller steps, to start the process early and to get help. So what is required for all applications, regardless of whether they have additional recommendations or additional supplemental statements required, every foundation scholarship requires a personal statement of 250 to 500 words. And like I said before, this is a type of writing that you're going to have to do at some point in your life. So it's really good practice, even if you don't end up winning. And just generally, the process and tools we discussed today can be adapted for any essay. This is probably going to be very similar to things you've learned in your English class or other classes where you have to do writing. So just some general rules of thumb. You want to make sure you read the criteria and prompts thoroughly. Just like if your professor assigns you an essay, you want to make sure you understand what the assignment is, what the professor is asking of you. So we are going to look closely at this prompt later, but just to glance at it now, it tells you 250 to 500 word personal biographical statement. Tells you a little bit about why they want this and what your personal statement should address. So I'll read that more thoroughly later on, but just to think about the general rules of thumb. You want to include required info, but make it your own. And that make it your own is kind of important, because you could look at this list of things that your personal statement should address. You could just kind of write a list, right? I am blah, blah, blah. This is an experience that has shaped me. Here are some of my skills. Here are my interests. Here are my personal qualities. Not only does that feel like a list and kind of boring, but it also sounds like you're answering somebody's questions. And so that's what I mean about making it your own. You definitely want to understand the prompts, understand what is required for you to include in this statement. But think about it like you want someone reading it to think that you just decided to write this essay, that you weren't assigned it, that there's something that you have to say that you want to express in this essay. So don't be afraid to, focus on one piece of information in the prompt, to prioritize it over the others, to answer things in a different order from the prompt. Those are all ways that you can kind of make it your own and put it in your own voice. And finally, and really most importantly, your goal here is to leave your reader with a memorable picture of you, and to kind of grab their interest. I think that sometimes when students write these types of essays, they forget that it's a human reading this. It's a human who likes to hear stories and who likes to have, to read about interesting things. So think about when you're reading, what do you find interesting? Probably details, probably stories, probably images, and what do you find kind of dry? So I used to have a job that involved reading a lot of personal statements from people who were applying to medical schools. And I just remember reading, statement after statement of like, I want to be a doctor because I really want to help people. I want to be a doctor because I want to help people. I want to be a doctor because I just really want to help people. And I don't doubt that all of those students really wanted to help people. But if you think about the human on the other end reading the same thing over and over and over, if you're the person who comes along and tells a story about why you want to help people, or gives some kind of image about, where your passion to be a doctor came from in a very specific way, you're the one that's going to be remembered in that kind of sea of similar things. So the things that stick in people's mind are images, stories, details. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit as we get into the writing process and the tools I'm going to give to you. So first of all, writing is a process. This is a very common visual tool to understand the writing process. Hopefully you've encountered it in some class at some point. But the idea here is really just that there are different steps to producing any piece of writing. Now, if you're like me in my high school days, in my college days, and a little bit into my grad school days, it might be really tempting and all too common to start with drafting and then jump straight to publication or your final draft. So that's really the thing that people are trying to get you to re-envision when they, make images such as this, to try and get you to think about what happens when you break it down into more steps, when you don't just write the first thing that comes to your head and then submit that as your final copy. What can happen to your writing? What can happen to your process when you kind of break it down? So this is the kind of like general way of thinking about it. I have written it out slightly differently, and as I'll show you in a minute, but generally the process applies to all writing, right? So like I said, hopefully you've encountered this in your classes before. And you can kind of adapt it to fit different needs, different writing situations, and also to fit your own process. It's a little misleading that there are these arrows here that go in a circle, because you don't necessarily have to do things in any particular order. So it really is fine if you want to start with drafting. Just understand that that's not your final copy, right? So if you start with drafting, you might go to revision. You might revise, realize you don't really have enough ideas there, and then you might jump back to pre-writing, and then you might, do some more revision. The one thing I would say not to put out of order is the editing, and we'll talk about this later as well. But editing, proofreading, that's the real fine tuning, and you don't want to do that with your first draft, because you might change a bunch of stuff, and then you've wasted a lot of time, correcting your spelling and agonizing over commas, and then you just throw out the whole sentence, right? So better to wait till the very end for that proofreading step. But with these first three steps, they're very interchangeable. So the way that I have envisioned it here, just to lay it out, is for your pre-writing, you want to generate some ideas and plan your writing. And this is the part that really gets you out of writer's block, because often when I work with students who are having writer's block, I don't do that so much at GCC, but in past jobs, the problem is really that they're starting with drafting, and that's not the right place for them. So if you sit down and open up your, whatever blank document, and stare at it for half an hour because you're trying to think of your first sentence, your problem is that you haven't generated any ideas first. You didn't come up with a plan. You're just jumping right into the essay, and of course that's going to be hard. So we're going to focus with the tool that I'm going to make available to you on generating ideas and planning your writing, so that when you go to drafting, you have a resource to draw from. You have ideas that you've already come up with that you can kind of like sift through, and when you get stuck, head over to that and grab some ideas. So coming up with your first draft, the other thing that happens when you pull the process apart like this is, if you know when you're drafting that there's a couple more steps, that this isn't your final copy, that there's going to be space for revision, there's going to be space for editing, it's freeing, right? You can stop worrying about those commas. You can stop worrying about your spelling. You can stop worrying if the sentence that you just wrote connects to the next sentence you're going to write, because it's more important to get those sentences out. You can figure out how to connect them later, right? So pulling it apart this way, hopefully will help you keep the flow going. And very important to revise. You want to leave yourself a lot of time for that. So that's why you want to get started with this process, because when you get to the end of your draft, you don't want to have 3 hours to go before you need to submit the final copy. So revision, crucial. Proofreading, also crucial when you are submitting something like this. It can make a real difference to how people are recognizing the effort that you put into this. So even if you have put a lot of effort in, even if you have revised 5 times, if you didn't proofread, if there are simple mistakes, typos, people are going to think that you didn't spend very much time on it. So definitely take that time, reach out for help for that, from friends, from spell check, from yourself. And we will talk about that in a moment. So I think I mentioned this before. You really want to break the process down into small steps. That's the key to moving forward. That's the key to avoiding procrastination. It's much easier to say, okay, today I'm going to sit down and just spend 10 minutes using the brainstorming tool that Kate gave me, and that's all I have to do for my scholarship essay today. So it's much easier to sit down and do that one step than to sit down and write an essay, right? So practice breaking things down into smaller steps, and assigning yourself those different steps on different days. And if you're following this process, then each step kind of generates material for the next step. So then you know what you're sitting down to do, and it's much easier to actually, do it. All right, so the tools that I'm going to give you are a brainstorm worksheet, and an outline template, and an example essay. So, oops, I did not need to do that. So I will make these available on the website. So wherever this video is posted, you should see this tool there as well. But if you don't, then definitely head over to the foundation scholarships main page, and it will absolutely be there. All right, so this tool is basically something to get you started thinking. So my 2 goals are for you to read the prompt very carefully and to do some initial thinking to give yourself some material to work with. So very important to remember as you're working through this, that this is not your actual essay, all right? Don't agonize over it. Don't spend all this time like trying to generate lots and lots of material for each individual question. You want to write as quickly as possible, not full sentences, just jot down your ideas in note form. And don't edit yourself yet. Just write down everything that comes to mind. If it doesn't really seem to fit or doesn't really lead you anywhere, no big deal. So looking at the prompt, we're going to read it really thoroughly now. First of all, it's telling you what the personal statement is for in the context of these scholarships. It is vital to helping our selection committees select recipients because it allows them to learn more about you than just your grades, activities, and achievements. Your statement is your moment to shine, show your personality, share your goals and passions, and compel our reviewers. We encourage you to take care in creating your statement, as it is your chance to stand out from other applicants. And then it tells you what your personal statement should address. So I just want to draw your attention to what it's saying there. What they're looking for in these essays, they're not looking for you to just talk about your grades, right? Or sort of like list your resume. They're really looking to know a little bit about your personality, to know a little bit about your goals and passions. And like I said, compel our reviewers. So think about those reviewers are human people, reading your essays, looking for something interesting about you and wanting to get to know you, and wanting to know who you are. So your personal statement should address the following. Now, keep in mind, this isn't a list that you need to go through and answer every single question. So there might be some things that you prioritize. I would say you want to hit each bullet point, but you don't necessarily need to list something of each of these within a bullet point, if that makes sense. So definitely tell us about who you are and what has shaped you. When it asks for your skills, interests, personal qualities, motivations, formative experiences, or identities. Don't go through and list your skills, your interests. My personal qualities are, I'm motivated by, my formative experiences, my identity is this. You don't necessarily need to hit every single one of those, but within this bullet point, what's important. Tell us about your experience at GCC. So that's the crucial part. Tell us about your experience at GCC. You don't need to hit every single one of these things, but ideas for ways to tell us about your experience at GCC could be your major, a class or extracurricular involvement that sparked something for you, meaningful encounters with faculty, staff, or peers, personal growth. Next bullet point, your future goals, life, work, and educational. And then finally, your larger purpose, interests, hopes and dreams, motivations, curiosities. So again, you don't want to go through and list your purpose, your interests, your hopes and dreams, your motivations, your curiosities, but they want to know something about your larger purpose, right? And they're giving you ideas for how to talk about your larger purpose. Really important statement in the parentheses here. We know these may change in the future. You're not writing a contract. So as I said, I've worked in the past with lots of students doing this kind of writing at other jobs that I've had. And over, I've run into students who are afraid to say they want to become a veterinarian because they're not really sure they want to become a veterinarian. They're not totally committed and they're still exploring and they're not really sure how to become a veterinarian. Nobody's going to chase you down with this essay in 10 years and say, you didn't become a veterinarian, give us the $350 back. It's, certainly don't lie, but writing about something that you're considering, that you're interested in, that you're exploring, it's fine. You don't have to, qualify it or say, I'm not sure if I really want this. If it is something you're exploring, totally fine to write about it as a hope or a dream. All right, so now that we've read the prompt really carefully, I'm not going to go through this whole tool because you can do that yourself, but I just want you to see that my intention here with this tool is to get you thinking and kind of generating material from what the prompt is asking about. And like I said at the beginning, don't agonize about this, right? I asked for 5 adjectives that describe your personal qualities. If you come up with 2 and you're like racking your brain for other things, don't agonize, move on to the next thing, like what gets you going? Because one thing that can help you about a tool like this and about brainstorming generally is if you run into something that sparks a lot that you have to say, that's something to stick with. That's something like, oh, I have a lot to say about something that's really important to me. I could write, I can't, I could fill this whole box and keep going about something that's really important to you. That's a clue that maybe that's something you could focus on and kind of like generate more interesting material. So, don't think of this as an assignment. This is a tool for you. Skip over what's not really bringing anything up for you. See where it gets you just for generating material. So first of all, just asking things from this prompt. And then this piece is more of an example of what to do with this stuff, right? So it says describe 1 or 2 specific moments from your college experience, possible ideas, your decision to come to GCC, your first day of class, a time when a professor blew your mind, something you learned from a classmate, a time you were nervous or unsure of yourself but moved forward anyway. So those are just ideas to think about. And then after that, I ask you to read that over and think about how can you add kind of like sensory details to this image? What did you see? What did you hear? How did you feel physically? What did you smell or taste? So you can go back and do this kind of exercise for a different piece. Like if you are thinking about 2 or 3 things that are really important to you, you could do a similar thing where you think of a moment when you realized that something was important to you, or some interaction you had with a person who was important to you, or an object that's important to you, and go through and do the same sensory things. So what I'm after here is pushing you to generate some details that you can use to tell a story about yourself. So like I said, keep in mind that it's okay to write about goals you're still deciding about. Nobody's going to come after you if your plans change. plans change. So all of these questions are about the kinds of questions in the end of the prompt, right? Your future goals, your larger purpose. So, specific things like what certificates or degrees do you plan to obtain in the long term? Are you going to go to a 4-year school and get a bachelor's degree? Are you going to go to an art school? Are you going to, get a practical nursing certificate? What job or career do you hope to have in 5 or 10 years? Why? Again, if anything here is not really, you don't have anything to say about it, fine, skip it. Find something you have something to say about. So you can go through the rest yourself. And I want to go down to the template, right? Because one thing that I think is hard for folks is in terms of breaking an essay like this down is just trying to figure out, what do I say? Where do I say it? What am I trying to do here? So going with a template, kind of like a cheat sheet of instructions on how to do this can really help. So what I did here was split it up into, 3 to 4 paragraphs, depending on whether you combine the conclusion here, and just kind of give you a goal for each paragraph, right? So the main, broad goal of each paragraph is underlined here. So I'm suggesting that in the introduction, you grab your reader's attention. That's your main goal. In your second paragraph, you write about your past and your present. And then in the third paragraph, you write about your future. And then the conclusion, you want to think about leaving that lasting impression. So these are just ideas for one way you could structure your essay, right? If there's something else that works for you, or if this leads you to a different way of organizing it, totally fine. But what you want to think about is, what is each paragraph doing? Like, what's your goal in each paragraph? And as long as you have one, then that's going to make your essay stronger. And thinking about the prompt and how the prompt relates to your organization can help you as well, right? If you have one paragraph that tells about who you are and what has shaped you, your personal qualities, your motivations, your experience at GCC, and your future goals, all in one paragraph, it's going to be very overwhelming for your reader. So the whole point of paragraphs is to help your reader organize the information that you're giving them. So think about what each paragraph is doing, and think about in terms of the goal of each paragraph, what's the overarching goal of your essay? What do you want your reader to walk away with as a picture of you, right? So when you're telling a story, for example, if you're telling a story about a specific moment from your college experience, think about what you want that story to mean for your reader. What do you want it to say about you? So it might portray you as somebody who is persistent. Maybe you write about a time that you failed a test, and then you studied, did better on the next test, right? So that, I'm sure, could be told in a more interesting way. But the idea is that your story has a point, right? Like, the point of that story is, I'm someone who is persistent in the face of failure, and works hard to turn that failure into a learning experience. So think about, like, what's your message about yourself, and think about how to kind of embed that in your story. So some more little writing tips. You don't want to write pages and pages that you're not going to use and waste time. But in general, don't worry too much about the word limit during your first draft. I guess do worry about it if you're not coming up with very much, but hopefully this brainstorming will help you get there. But don't, if you feel like you're writing too much in your first draft, don't worry about it. Edit it down. in your revision process, and what you have left after you take stuff out will probably be much higher quality than if you edit yourself in your first draft, and then you're cutting things out that you might want to use. So as I said before, revising and proofreading, different activities. Focus on organization, meaning, and wording when you revise. Focus on the spelling and grammar part when you proofread. Don't waste time proofreading until you finished revising. If you're stuck on the intro or anything else, skip it for a moment and come back to it later. Sometimes writing the body of the essay will figure out how you want to start. Sometimes writing the conclusion will help you figure out the middle. I know for me, that sometimes helps me organize the body. I often start with the conclusion when I'm writing something. Like I said before, this is just an example of a possible way of organizing your essay. If another way makes more sense to you, go for it. Like I said, make sure each paragraph has a clear purpose. But I think sometimes what holds people back with these kinds of essays is just a worry about whether they're doing it right. There's no right or wrong way to do it, right? If you're answering the prompt, if you're speaking to the prompt, let's say it that way, then you're doing it fine. If you're writing an essay that people are going to remember, you're doing fine. And I don't mean you have to like blow people out of the water with your, one of a kind, unique, super exciting life story. It's not necessarily about that. It's, anybody can tell a story about your life that people remember, even if it's a kind of everyday moment. If you kind of like, if it's meaningful to you, if you kind of connect it to the message, like I said. So when I say, leave a lasting impression, I'm not saying this has to be, mind-blowingly profound. I'm just trying to encourage you not to be afraid to be a little more personal in what you write about, and don't think so much about, what should this essay sound like, but more, what do I want to say about me, right? All right, so that's the tool that I will put up for you, and I hope it gets you started. The outline template was the bottom part of that worksheet. And then I want to just look at this one example essay. So again, one example, not the way to write this. There are as many ways to write this as there are people who are going to write this. But I want to draw your attention to, first of all, the fact that she's got paragraphs, right? So you can clearly see right away that it's organized. Paragraphs aren't too long. They're about the same length, not too overwhelming. And I want to draw your attention to her topic sentences, right? Usually the first sentence. I had been away from college for over 2 decades. I'm going to guess that this paragraph is about her past, about what brought her to GCC. It's the introduction, so it kind of tells a story, right? She talks about, initially I was not confident in my ability to succeed as a student. Professors helped me. I'm now one who makes a dean's list. I'm now one who stands before over 100 people to pitch a new business idea. See how she put that little image in there? She didn't just say, I'm not afraid to speak in public, right? She gave us a very specific image of her standing before 100 people to pitch a new business idea. Now I got a little nervous just reading that, imagining myself in front of 100 people. So anything you can do to just spark the imagination of your reader is great. So that's a small image that she put in there. I'm one who seeks out students in need of help with math, accounting, or English. I'm imagining a student sitting at a table tutoring. So she's telling these things, these details, these little images, and they tell something about her, right? I'm now one who makes a dean's list. She wants to send the message that she's a strong student academically. I'm one who stands before over 100 people to pitch a new business idea. She's saying I'm someone who's confident, someone who can express her passion, and somebody who helps others, right? So she's choosing these images carefully. So again, back to topic sentences. I'm a business administration transfer major and plan to attend the Eisenberg School of Management by spring of 2017. I'm guessing this paragraph is about her future, right? What are her goals? I'm passionately committed to helping my local communities thrive and overcome challenges because I love where I live. So I assume that this is going to be about her interests, her passions, things that are important to her. And then here, scholarship funding will be integral to my continued pursuit of a high quality education. This is going to be about why she deserves this, this award. And then she concludes with a thank you. So again, don't take this as the way to write this, right? Especially since the prompt has changed a little bit now. But what I want you to take from this is the organization, the idea that each paragraph has a specific idea, and the ways that she includes little images about herself to describe herself and really give you a picture of who she is. All right, so that is one example. And now I'd like to tell you about the resources that you can take advantage of. So I talked about my scholarship essay writing drop-in workshop. So again, that's next Wednesday, February 24th at noon. And you can check the GCC homepage for the event listing for the Zoom link. And then in terms of individual assistance, peer tutors cannot help you with these essays because they are your peers. They're also students and they're also eligible to apply for these scholarships. So that puts them in a position where they can't be helping you with yours. But Montserrat Archibald, who you may know if you've ever used peer tutoring, because she's the staff assistant for the tutoring program, she's staff, not a student, so she can work with you. So you don't want to go to the website and request an appointment like you would for a peer tutor. You can email her directly and just say you're looking for help with your essay. So I want to be clear what kind of help this is. Montserrat is not going to proofread your paper for you. So that is something that you need to use friends for, do yourself, use spell check. She's also not going to email back and forth with you to give you feedback. You're going to have a meeting with her, right? So that said, you don't necessarily have to have your essay done, right? So don't feel like you have to have a draft and show up with the draft. If you want to talk to her at the beginning and talk to her about your ideas, that's totally fine. If you want to come with some writing you've done and talk about that, if you want to bring a draft and talk about revision, great. But just be clear that you're going to meet and talk in person about your essay. She's not going to email you feedback. And the help that she can offer is not going to be proofreading help, but rather, content, organization, revision, ideas, that kind of help. So that is, those are the resources for help with your essays. If you're having technical difficulties, as I mentioned before, if you're having trouble accessing the scholarship application, you want to email the webmaster at gcc.mass.edu, and that email address will pop up on the actual application page, as you saw. If you are having trouble kind of like generally navigating the website, or if you're having trouble with Google Docs or Word or wherever you're trying to write your essay, library tech tutors are a really good resource. You can reach them by going to the library homepage. Website is listed there. And a chat box will pop up during the library's open hours, and somebody can help you with your sort of like quick tech questions. You can also go to peer tutoring for tech help, but as I said, they can't help you with your actual essay. So this is the end of my presentation, and I hope that it has been helpful for you. And I hope that you are able to attend the drop-in workshop next Wednesday. If you have any follow-up questions, You can also email me at walkerk@gcc.mass.edu. And I'm going to, I'll write it here because the closed captioning did not do it correctly. So walkerk@gcc.mass.edu. I am not able to meet with you individually to talk about your papers. And I'm going to direct you to other resources for questions about the actual scholarship application. But if you have a question about anything I talked about in here, I'm very happy to answer quick questions. And if it's a question that someone else can answer, I will direct you to them and I won't be mad about it. I look forward to hearing from you. So good luck and get started.